What you got there?
I have your axe, your small forest axe, but not just any small forest axe. That's actually the Ray Mears logo. You have a special Ray Mears edition.
Oh, a long time. Yeah, I went on a trip with him, did some work with him, and he gave me that for, oh man, that was a long time ago.
So first thing I would say is I commend you on it that it's been used. Like it's been out being used, man. That's what, I mean, they look great on a wall, but part of me thinks you're kind of doing a little bit of a disservice if that's all it does is live on a wall. So this has been out there doing stuff, which you can tell. So good on you for that.
Now the bad. You're gonna.
Well, no. I mean, your head. You know, it could use a bit. I do see that you've been oiling it. I can tell it's been oiled, so that's good. I mean, canoeing is a very hard environment for wood-handled axes, just because, you know, it spends a lot of time in the bottom of a boat. Like there've been trips where we've gone on and we got pouring rain from the get-go, and then there's hours of paddling, so it's sitting, you know, in the bottom of a boat submerged in water. Because actually water is kind of it's kind of what you have to be wary of with wood-handled axes. I mean, not if there's, you know, it gets rained on, but like sitting soaking in water, that's one thing to be kind of concerned about. It's not a bad edge. It's not a killer edge, but it's certainly functional. Could probably be touched up. But anyways, to this end, we do have these new care products for your axe.
So are you now changed your job and you're now selling cosmetics?
No, not exactly. These are just things that there's actually, it's cool because there's I don't know if we're going to run through all of them. I mean, there's a couple sharpening tools, but then the care tools are kind of useful. So like for instance here, like it's kind of clouded over since we got in here. So, you know, if we want to kind of, this could probably use oiling again, you know, but for today, I think what's most important is this stuff, which is handle wax. Like on the spots you got to worry about are on the top here, because there's exposed wood grain, and on the bottom here, the knob swell. There's exposed grain on those, and that's where water can get in. If water does get in, I think I mentioned this before, it can swell the wood cells to the point where they rupture, and then once your handle is dry again, those cells will shrink and your head will shrink, and then the handle will shrink, and then your head can come loose. So this stuff is a mix of wax and oils, so it's good for a couple purposes. Good for just waterproofing in general. Like what I'll do, I'll probably apply it on the whole handle, seeing as I think we're going to get rained on, but especially up on the top here. Good, and it's nice because it's a mix of wax and oils, so it's soft. Pure wax is sometimes hard, you got to melt it. This is nice, you can just rub it on to cover that part of the handle. And then as well on the underside here, I would do this as well, you know, fairly heavily, like I say, in case we get rained on this trip. And then sometimes after oiling, it has a certain feel, which is nice, but sometimes it's a little, sometimes you want something that's got a little more grip. So this is good for that too. You can apply this right onto the handle itself as well. And then if you let it dry a bit, you can kind of buff it and then get a bit of tackiness. So there's a bit more grip than just the oil itself. And because we're out, just putting this on the handle again will help with waterproofing. Although if you have been oiling, that is kind of that does the bulk of the work for protecting the handle from moisture, which is why it's important to oil your handles. I mean, any kind of wood handled tool is going to require maintenance, so it's a good idea, you know, oiling once a year. Twice a year is probably a better practice, but once a year. And then just making sure before you go out, like I say, you've got some kind of protection on the spots that are likely to have water. So this will get us through this one. And this stuff it's made in Canada actually too. It's got beeswax in it, Canadian beeswax. Your handle's good to go. And then this is, so oiling the head, it keeps rust off of the head as well. There are oils out there, but one downside of a lot of oils is that they're petroleum based. And I read maybe we can do like a slide, but I read a shocking statistic about the amount of petroleum lubricants that come into Canada and the amount that end up at waste disposal, you know, your local municipal waste disposal sites. There's a huge imbalance. A lot comes in and not a lot comes out the other end where it's supposed to be disposed of safely, which means that's all getting put into the environment, which is not cool. So we do have petroleum oils for the axe head, but again, you're bringing petroleum products out into a pristine setting, which, you know, not optimal. So this is new, which is plant-based. It's biodegradable, non-toxic, good stuff, and it's nice because it's light, so you can just spritz it on. And then if it gets, you know, into the environment, it's not going to harm anything. It'll break down. Just spray some of that on the head. Spread it around a bit. Then I let that just sit and dry for a sec. And your sheath. Sheath has seen some action. Again, which is a good thing. I don't ever like these things looking too pristine. So for your sheath, a bit of dirt on there, it'd be good to clean it. There's a sheath cream. Again, it's like water protection for the sheath. And again, you don't have to do this like before every trip. You know, once or twice a year on your leather. You can just rub it in, and it's actually nicer if it's sunnier. So it can kind of heat the leather up a bit, so it kind of soaks it in a bit better. But because we're going to get rained on, I'll just apply some of this. And I'll let that sit for a minute or two just to soak in. And then I'll buff that up. And maybe in the meantime, you know, that edge is okay. I think we can do this trip with that edge. But if it did need a touch up, there's these two products which are cool. So this is an axe stone. Comes in this aluminum tin, which is nice, so you can store it in here. But then also, I like to use it with water. I find it easier to find where you are on the stone and kind of to find where the edge is by soaking this in water. So you can put it in the tin and then soak it in the tin. Just pour the water out before you start using it. And then you can store it back in the tin. So that's good if you, for kind of a rough, you can get it sharp with this, but not killer. To kind of, once you've got kind of a basic sharpness, to refine that edge even more, then I've got this one, which is a field sharpener, which you can use a couple different ways. For your knives, you could lay it flat and run knives along it. But I like on the axe to use it like a, yeah, actually Ray Mears had a good tip where he had a stick. We should cut and we'll show. Okay, here's a good tip from Ray Mears on. The problem with it, with anything like this, is how do you keep it still? If you put it down, you know, it moves along where you're trying to use it. So I'll show you the Ray Mears tip, which is really good. But for axes, I would use this like a file, you know, this way or this way, you know, and it's long enough that it keeps your fingers away from the edge, which is nice. So if you need to touch up your edge, like I say, this is okay. Maybe at the end of the season, you touch this up. But this is good for touch-ups when you're out. Any questions?
You've wowed me with your cosmetics. you got a little mascara.
Yeah, it kind of looks like, yeah. Your girlfriend's going to be asking you what's with all the little care products.
Do you have a pink Cadillac to sell that with?
Do not. No, but good stuff. This Care products all made in Canada. Sharpeners are made in the US. And there you have it, a little Care products for your axes, wood-handled axes. And like I say, a little more eco-friendly. All this stuff biodegradable, non-toxic. So you know, if you end up getting some in the environment or whatever, no harm, no foul.
What was that?
That's our measure out on the stick, I mean. Your size of what you want to cut out here. And then kind of just notch it. And just create a little channel for it.
It's like watching that primitive show on YouTube.
Try to go a little deeper, actually. So you might have to do this fast speed. Actually, a little big. All right, so that'll stay on the log now. So now, I guess my knife is sharp, but now you've got a surface here where you can run your knife along without worrying about it moving around, or do you move your knife around on this, get her good and sharp. This is sharp, which is why I'm not doing it. But that's a good little tip. Keeps it in place for you.
All right, one last. When you said my knife's sharp, how do you know your knife's sharp?
Well, I always do the hair cutting test. So if you can take hair off your arm with your knife, which I can with mine, if you can take hair off, for me that's sharp. Same with the axe. If you can get hair off your, I mean, you gotta be careful while you do it, but if you can get hair off your knife or arm, then you've sharpened your knife well, in my opinion. I mean, a sharp knife is a safe knife. A dull knife is a dangerous knife.
So what's that about? Like, I've always heard that, but what do you mean?
Well, because the edge, if the knife is dull, you're going to tend to, this sticks into stuff. Like a piece of wood, you feel it like on your, you can do that test on your nail too, like where you put out, if it, you can feel it sticking, like it's not sliding, it grips, right? So a good sharp knife, you don't have to force or push too hard. If it's dull, then you start applying more force to compensate for the fact that there's not a really fine edge on it, and that's when it can slip off and you end up jamming it into yourself. It's just, you use less force, the knife does more of the work, less force, and just safer all around. It's more controlled, much more controlled that way. Same with axes. If they're dull, they can tend to glance off things. You end up, again, applying too much force, and yeah, so you want to make sure your knives and axes are as sharp as possible. Well, I do anyways. I mean, I wouldn't do a backcountry trip and bring out a dull axe or a dull knife, you know? Which is why, again, having some tools to bring out with you in the field, and then if it needs a touch-up, you know, sitting around the campfire, you refining your edges on your tools, and then they're good to go when you need them.
All right, it's time to portage.
Okay.
It's going to rain. Thanks, Tim. You're a very wise man.
Well, I don't know about that, but
now I know why you don't have any hair in your arm.
Yes. Yes, if you see that arm is, and it's always my left arm. If it's hairless, that means I've been sharpening all my tools.